You have likely heard the term tariff before and associate it with trade. So if you have country A and you have country B, and let's say country A exports some type of good to country B could put tariffs on those goods. So could place a tariff. Now, what is a tariff? Well, it could be a certain percentage of the cost of those goods. So let's say that these are cars that are going from country A to country B. Country B might say, hey, for cars coming from country A, we're going to put a 10% tariff. So if this car costs $10,000 before the tariff, now there's going to be an extra 10% of that. So an extra $1,000 charge that would go to the government, that would go to country B, but it has the effect of making these cars more expensive, so raising the price, and which would probably lower the demand as well. And you might say, why would country B actually do this? Well, there's several reasons why they do that. One, they might want to protect their domestic car manufacturers. So if they can make the imports more expensive, it might make domestic cars look a little bit more favorable. They might want to penalize country A for what it views as unfair trade practices. Or maybe country A put some tariffs on other goods from country B, and country B is now retaliating. Or it could be as simple as country B just wanting to get more revenue. Now, tariffs are always a bit of a dangerous game because it can lead to retaliation, where the goods going from country B to country A says, hey, you put tariffs on our goods, we're going to put tariffs on your goods. But I'm not here to say whether tariffs are good or bad. Sometimes countries have very legitimate reasons for wanting to protect their industries against what they view as unfair trade practices. But what we will do in this video is think about tariffs in the context of our classic supply and demand curves. So let's say this is the market for trucks in country B right over here. So we're dealing with country B. And so you see your supply curve and you see your demand curve. And just to simplify our model, let's assume that all the trucks are supplied by country A, that country B does not get trucks from anywhere else, including from itself. And country B decides to put a fixed tariff on each truck. So let's say it wants to charge an extra $1,000 per truck on top of what the suppliers charge, and that extra $1,000 goes to the government. How would that affect the curves here and the equilibrium price and quantity? Pause this video and try to figure it out. Well, one way to think about it, at any given quantity, whatever the price was, to a consumer, the price is now going to be higher by that tariff amount. And so let's say that this amount is $1,000. So from the consumer point of view, the supply curve would look $1,000 higher. And so that will change the equilibrium price. As you would expect, the new equilibrium price is now higher, and the new equilibrium quantity is now lower. Now, given that, what has happened to the consumer surplus and the producer surplus? Well, the old consumer surplus was everything above this line and below this demand curve. So it was this larger triangle. But now the new consumer surplus is just the part that I'm shading. So the consumer surplus has shrunk by a little bit. And what about the producer surplus? Well, the producers aren't seeing that higher price. The producers are seeing this price right over here. The difference between the two, that's the tariff, and that's going to the government. So the old producer surplus was this entire triangle below the white line and above the yellow supply curve, but now the new producer surplus is this triangle right over here. So the producer surplus has also shrunk. Now, what about government revenue? Well, the government revenue is going to be the tariff amount times the amount per unit times the quantity. And so it's going to be this area right over here. And you can see, even if you add up the consumer surplus to the government revenue to the producer surplus, there's still some amount of the total surplus that has been lost. That would be this area right over here that I'm trying to do in this solid orange color. So tariffs, in pure economic terms, at least when you look at a model like this, will reduce the total surplus. They will raise the price and they will tend to lower the quantity. And because of that, economists tend to be more on the side against tariffs. But with that said, governments can sometimes have legitimate reasons for wanting to protect a domestic industry or retaliating against what they see as unfair trade practices. Now, a related idea to a tariff, especially when a government is concerned about taking too much imports from another country, is they might try to impose some type of a quota, where they say at most country A can export, let's say, 10,000 units of these trucks to country B. And usually that quota is a lower number than what would be the equilibrium quantity in the market. And so you can imagine what might happen there. I won't draw it out in this video, but you can imagine what happens if the government puts some quota that's below the equilibrium quantity. Like tariffs, that situation would also affect price and reduce your total surplus.